August 14th, 1974. I was 24 years old, working on my father's commercial fishing boat off the coast of Northern California when Hurricane Delilah hit harder than predicted. We operated a 42-foot trawler out of Crescent City, running nets for rockfish and lingcod. My father Robert was 53 that summer, and we'd been working together since I was old enough to tie a proper knot. The storm upgraded faster than the Weather Service told us. 15-foot swells, wind tearing the tops off waves. We started hauling in nets to head back when the winch motor seized. Salt water in the housing. The nets were still out, full and dragging, creating resistance we couldn't overcome manually. We were stuck broadside to the swells, taking water over the gunnel. I worked on that motor for 2 hours while my father fought to keep us steady. Got it running just after dark. By then, we'd drifted 4 miles off course, closer to the rocks than was safe. We brought up the nets and sorted through the catch by flashlight. Standard haul, mostly. Then I found something tangled near the bottom that made me stop cold. At first, I thought it was a seal, but the body was wrong, too long, proportions not quite right. My father came over, and we both stared without speaking. She was about 5.5 feet long, head to tail. The upper body was humanoid. Arms, shoulders, torso with breasts marking her as female. Pale skin with a faint shimmer of scales along the ribs. The face was human enough to be disturbing. Eyes closed, nose and lips that could have belonged to any young woman. But below the waist there was a tail. Muscular, covered in scales that caught the light in shades of green and silver and deep blue. The flukes at the end were torn and bleeding, shredded by the net's mesh. My father checked her neck for a pulse. "She's alive," he said quietly. "Barely." I could see her gills, 3 slits on each side of her neck, flexing weakly, trying to pull oxygen from air. The tail injuries were severe, mesh cut through scales into muscle underneath. If we threw her back like this, she'd die within minutes. My father looked at her, then at the dark ocean. "Throw her back," he said. "It's the kindest thing." But I was looking at her face. Her eyes were moving beneath the closed lids. One hand twitched, fingers curling. The hand was unmistakably a hand. 4 fingers and a thumb. "We can't," I said. "We can't just let her drown." My father's face was hard. "Son, we don't know what this is. The government finds out we pulled something like this from the ocean. They'll take everything." "I know," I said, "but we did this. We have to try." He was quiet for a long time. Finally, he nodded. "Okay, we try. But if she dies, she goes back in the water, and we never speak of this." We wrapped her in a tarp and I carried her below deck. I cleaned the tail wounds with fresh water and antiseptic. She made sounds when I touched the damaged tissue, high-pitched clicks and low moaning. Her gills needed salt, water. I filled a bucket and poured it over her neck every few minutes, watching the gills flutter. It took 4 hours to get back through the storm. 4 hours of me pouring water over her gills, checking her pulse, watching her struggle to breathe. When we finally made harbor at dawn, her eyes opened. They were large, dark gray, almost black. She looked at me directly, and I saw recognition, understanding, fear. "Easy," I said. "We're trying to help. You're safe." She stopped struggling. Her breathing slowed slightly. My father came down. "We're at dock. No one's around. If we're going to do something, we do it now." "The cove," I said. "We take her to the cove." My father had inherited 17 acres of coastal property with a natural saltwater cove hidden behind rock formations and accessible only through the property. "You're serious," my father said. "I don't know what I want," I said. "But if we throw her back now, she dies. The cove is protected. She can heal there." My father nodded slowly. "This is on you, David. You wanted to save her. You're responsible." We loaded her into his truck and drove to the property. The roads were empty. We carried her down the rocky path to the cove, which took both of us. At least 120 pounds. The cove was 40 feet across, 15 feet deep at center, connected to the ocean by a narrow channel. We lowered her into the water as gently as we could. She floated motionless for a moment. Then her gills flared wide, and she took a long, shuddering breath. Her eyes opened, and she looked up at us. Then she submerged, tail giving one weak flick before she disappeared. We stood there waiting. She surfaced 5 minutes later near the far edge, watching us from the dark water. "I'll come back tonight," I told my father. "Bring fish, check her wounds." He looked tired, older. "This stays between us," he said. "No one can know. Not your sister, not anyone. If this gets out, we lose everything." I understood. But standing there, watching her watch us, I also understood my life had just changed in ways I couldn't yet comprehend. I came back that evening with a bucket of fish and a heavy feeling in my chest. The storm had passed, leaving the air clean and cold. I climbed down to the cove and stopped at the water's edge. She was floating in the center, with just her head above surface. When she saw me, she didn't dive. I sat on the flat rock we'd used as a diving platform as kids. "I brought food," I said. "Fish. I don't know if you eat fish, but it's what I have." I held up a rockfish and tossed it into the water near her. She looked at it, then back at me. She didn't move toward it. After 10 minutes, she dove. I lost sight of her, then saw movement near the bottom where the fish had sunk. She came back up, and the fish was gone. Over the next hour, I fed her 7 more. By the 4th one, she'd gotten close enough that I could see her face clearly. Her skin had more color now, less gray. The scales along her shoulders caught the fading light. Her hair was long and dark, floating around her head like seaweed. The tail wounds were still bad. Shredded tissue, exposed muscle. She favored her left side. "I need to check your tail," I said, pointing. "Can you come closer?" She looked at me for a long moment, then slowly swam toward the rocks. She stopped about 6 feet away. The wounds looked infected, swelling, yellowish discharge I recognized from treating fish injuries. "I need to clean that," I said. "It's infected. But I need you to come up on the rocks, just for a few minutes." She tilted her head in a gesture that looked remarkably human. Then she swam closer and placed both hands on the stone. She pulled herself halfway out, tail still submerged. I moved slowly, pulling out antiseptic and clean gauze. The net had cut almost to the bone in places. I poured antiseptic over the tears, and she made that sound again, high-pitched clicking mixed with low moaning. But she didn't pull away. She gripped the rocks and let me work. It took 20 minutes to clean and wrap both damaged areas. When I finished, she looked at the bandages, then at me. Then she reached out and touched my arm. Brief contact, her fingers cool and slightly rough. Then she slid back into the water and disappeared. I came back every day for 2 weeks. Brought fish, changed bandages when she'd let me, sat on the rocks trying to figure out what she was. The wounds healed slowly but visibly. By the end of the first week, she'd let me touch her tail without flinching. By the end of the second week, she was eating from my hand. My wife, Sarah, noticed something was different. We'd been married 2 years. I told her I was working on repairs at my father's property. It wasn't entirely a lie, but the weight of it sat heavy. On the 15th day, something changed. She was already at the surface when I arrived. She swam close, closer than ever before. Then she opened her mouth and made a sound that had rhythm to it, that rose and fell like speech, like she was trying to form words. She made the sound again, watching my face. Then she pointed at herself, at her chest. She made the sound a third time, and I understood. She was trying to tell me her name. The sound was complex, musical, nothing I could reproduce. "What do I call you?" I asked. "Can I give you a name?" "Marina. It means of the sea. Is that okay?" She was quiet. Then she reached out and touched my hand. One tap, just one. Like yes. "Marina," I said again. She clicked softly and slipped back into the water. By October 1974, Marina's wounds had healed enough that she could swim normally. The scars were still visible, but she'd regained full range of motion. She moved through the water with hypnotic grace, body undulating in smooth, powerful motions. But more remarkable was what had developed between us: communication. Not with words, but with gestures, sounds, and a kind of mutual understanding I'd never experienced. Marina was too smart, too expressive, too obviously conscious to be just an animal. The way she watched me when I talked, eyes tracking my mouth. The way she'd imitate the rhythm of my sentences with her own vocalizations. The way she'd wait for acknowledgement before eating, as if meals were social activities. I brought Sarah to the property in November. The weight of lying to her had become unbearable. I told her everything, about the storm, finding Marina, the decision to bring her here. Sarah looked at me like I'd lost my mind. Then Marina surfaced, and the look changed. "My God," Sarah whispered. "David, what is she?" "I don't know," I said. "There's nothing like her on record. She's been here 3 months. She's intelligent, Sarah. She understands us." Marina had been watching from the middle of the cove. Now she swam closer, stopping about 10 feet from where we stood. She looked at Sarah with that direct, assessing gaze, then made a soft clicking sound. "What does that mean?" Sarah asked. "I think it means hello," I said. Sarah knelt at the water's edge. "Hello," she said quietly. "I'm Sarah. I'm not going to hurt you." Marina dove. I thought she'd been frightened, but she surfaced near the rocks, close enough to touch. She was holding something, a piece of abalone shell, worn smooth, with mother-of-pearl iridescence. She held it out toward Sarah. "Is she giving this to me?" Sarah asked. "I think so," I said. "It's how she shows friendship." Sarah came back every few days after that. She'd sit on the rocks and talk to Marina, read aloud. Marina seemed to enjoy Sarah's presence, surfacing more often when she was there. Sarah started noticing patterns. Marina learned that yes meant agreement, no meant the opposite. She'd tap once for yes, twice for no. Food meant we were bringing fish. Water meant the liquid itself. The vocabulary built slowly through repetition. By December, Marina understood at least 50 words and could respond to simple questions, but she couldn't speak, not human speech. Her vocal anatomy was fundamentally different, adapted for underwater sound. The sounds she made in air were clicks, whistles, and that haunting song we'd hear occasionally. Beautiful, but not words. Sarah came up with the idea of teaching her simple gestures. Point at yourself for I. Point at us for you. Raise your hand for yes, wave it for no. Bring hands together for more. Hold up one hand flat for stop. Marina learned these within days. She had her own gestures, too. When she touched her throat with both hands, it meant the water was wrong. When she rubbed her tail, it meant pain. When she breached and clicked sharply, it meant warning. We learned that gesture in January 1975. I was at the cove watching Marina hunt small fish through the channel. Then she breached, clicked 3 times sharply, and dove, hiding. I looked around confused. Then I heard voices. 2 men on the coastal trail about 200 yards away, hikers discussing weather and routes. They passed without stopping, but Marina stayed hidden 20 minutes after they were gone. "She's afraid of people," Sarah said that night. "Not just cautious. Afraid." I nodded, and I think she has good reason to be. By March, Sarah was pregnant. We'd been trying for a year, and the pregnancy was joy and new worry. We had decisions to make about where we'd live, how we'd support a family, what we'd tell our child about the creature in the cove. Because by then I'd accepted Marina was going to be part of our lives permanently. She was too intelligent to release like an injured seal. She understood us, trusted us, depended on us. In April, Marina did something that changed my understanding again. Sarah and I were at the cove, and I was explaining work needed on the property: fence repairs, clearing brush, fixing the shed roof. I was gesturing, pointing at different areas. When I finished, Marina surfaced with a long piece of driftwood. She laid it on the flat rock, then arranged smaller sticks around it. She was making a map, a crude representation of The property with the cove marked by shells. She pointed at the map, then at us, then at different areas. Then she picked up kelp and laid it across one section where I'd said the fence was broken. "That's not possible," Sarah said quietly. "She's in the water. She can't see the property. How does she know the layout?" "I don't know," I said, "but she does." Marina clicked softly, satisfied with herself for making us understand. Looking at that map, at the intelligence in her eyes, I felt wonder and fear I couldn't name. We weren't keeping an animal in that cove. We were keeping a person. May 17th, 1975. 3 days after Sarah's ultrasound confirmed we were having a girl. I was working on the boat with my father when a dark blue sedan pulled up. 2 men got out wearing casual clothes, but something about them screamed federal agent. "Robert Chen," the first man said. He was tall, mid-40s, gray at the temples. "I'm Agent Caldwell with the National Marine Fisheries Service. This is Agent Porter. We'd like to ask about unusual marine activity." My father wiped his hands on a rag. "What kind of unusual activity?" "Fishermen reporting strange sounds in the water," Caldwell said. "Vocalizations that don't match known cetacean species. We're surveying the coastline. Your boat was in the area during Hurricane Delilah last August. Did you encounter anything unusual?" "Storm was rough," my father said. "Worst I've seen in years. Had mechanical problems, got blown off course. Didn't see anything unusual." "No unusual catches?" Porter asked. He was shorter, stocky, with sharp eyes. "Nothing dead or injured in your nets?" "Nothing worth reporting," my father said. "Lost most of the catch to storm damage." Caldwell pulled out a notebook. "We'd like to survey the coastline of your property. We understand you own land with ocean access." My father's expression didn't change. "That's private property. You'd need a warrant." "We're not looking to intrude," Porter said, "just doing our due diligence. Let us take a look. We can rule out your property and move on." "No," my father said. "You want to survey my land, get a warrant. Otherwise, we're done." Caldwell handed him a business card. "If you encounter anything unusual, give us a call, anything at all." My father took the card without looking at it. The agents left slowly. When they were out of sight, my father turned to me. "They know," he said quietly. "They don't know what we have, but they know something's out there, and they're not going to stop looking." I went to the cove that evening and told Marina what happened. She was floating near the surface, and when I explained about the government agents, she sank lower. Her whole body language changed from relaxed to tense, watchful. When I finished, she made a gesture I'd never seen. She pointed at the sky, then made a motion like something falling, crashing down. Then she touched her chest and shook her head sharply. "No, they can't find me." "I understand," I told her. "We won't let them find you. But you have to be quiet. No sounds anyone outside might hear. You have to stay hidden." She tapped once. "Yes." Then she dove deep and didn't surface for over an hour. The agents came back 3 weeks later with a team of 4 and equipment, sonar sensors, recording devices, underwater cameras. They set up on the public beach a quarter-mile from our property line and spent 2 days surveying coastal waters. My father got a lawyer who told us that without a warrant, they couldn't access our land, but they could survey public waters around it. For 2 days, Marina stayed completely submerged. Sarah and I took turns watching from the house. We brought her food at night through the channel, but couldn't check on her directly. It was the longest she'd gone without human contact since we'd found her. On the 3rd day, the agents packed up and left. But I saw Caldwell looking up at our property before he got in his car, studying the cliffs, the rock formations, the narrow gaps where a hidden cove might exist. He didn't know exactly where it was, but he knew it was there. That night when I climbed down to the cove, Marina was at the surface immediately. She pulled herself halfway up on the rocks, reaching for me with both hands. I'd never seen her do that. She was shaking, trembling. I sat at the water's edge and let her hold on to me, her cold fingers gripping my arms. "It's okay," I told her. "They're gone. You're safe." But even as I said it, I wasn't sure it was true. The government had resources we couldn't match, technology we didn't understand, time on their side. We'd won this round, but there would be others. And eventually, I was afraid, we'd lose. Marina looked up at me, and I saw something I'd never seen before. Not fear, not trust, dependence. She was depending on us completely, for survival, for freedom, for life. I'd made a promise the day I pulled her from that net, to try, to help, to keep her safe. A promise I wasn't sure I could keep. Emma Grace Chen was born November 3rd, 1976. 7 pounds, 4 ounces, dark hair, and her mother's eyes. I held her in the hospital while Sarah slept and thought about the secret we'd be teaching her to keep. We moved to my father's property in January 1977. The house was small, but paid for and remote. Far enough from town that visitors were rare, close enough to the cove that I could check on Marina multiple times, daily. Marina met Emma when Emma was 6 months old. I carried Emma down to the cove with Sarah beside me. Marina surfaced immediately, staring at Emma. Then she made a sound I'd never heard, soft, high-pitched, almost like bird chirping. Emma laughed, that baby belly laugh that sounds like pure joy. She reached toward Marina with both hands. Marina swam closer slowly, staying just out of reach. Then she dove and came back with a shell, small, smooth, pink. She held it out toward Emma. Emma took it, put it in her mouth the way babies do, and Marina clicked with what I'd learned was amusement. She likes her, Sarah said quietly. With Emma, there was no caution, just curiosity and what looked like tenderness. Emma grew up with Marina. By the time she could walk, she'd toddle to the cove holding my hand. By the time she could talk, Marina was part of her vocabulary. She called her Rena, unable to manage the full name. I'm not proud of how young Emma was when we taught her about secrets. She was 3, maybe 4, when I sat her down and explained that Rena was special, that other people wouldn't understand, that if Emma talked about Rena, people might try to take her away. Emma's eyes went wide. Take her where? To a place where she'd be alone, I said, where she'd be scared. So Rena is our secret, just for family. Okay? Okay, Emma said. I won't tell. And she didn't. Even in preschool, with friends and playdates and birthday parties, she never mentioned Marina, never slipped up. My son Jacob was born June 1980, another healthy baby with a cry that could wake neighbors if we'd had any. Jacob was different from Emma, more active, fearless, less inclined to warnings. When he was 2, he tried to climb into the cove alone, nearly fell. When he was 3, he jumped in fully clothed while I was changing Marina's bandages. Can Rena get sick? Jacob asked one day. He was 4, sitting on the rocks while I worked. Yes, I said. Everything alive can get sick. Will she die? Someday, I said. Everything that lives eventually dies, but not soon, not if we take care of her. When I die, will Rena be sad? I stopped and looked at him. Yes, I said. I think she would be very sad. Marina had been listening. She reached out and touched Jacob's foot. Then she made that soft, chirping sound I'd first heard with Emma. She likes me, Jacob said. She does, I agreed. The kids swam with Marina starting when they were 5 and 6. I'd taught them both in the cove under her watchful eyes. When I was confident they were strong enough, I let them swim together. Marina would stay close, ready to support them if they struggled. She'd let them hold her shoulders while she swam, pulling them through the water faster than they could manage alone. Emma would shriek with joy. Jacob would beg for more, faster, deeper. Sarah sometimes worried we were asking too much of them. But I'd see Emma sitting on rocks, reading to Marina, chapter books as she got older, her voice carrying over the water. I'd see Jacob bringing Marina interesting things he'd found, presenting them with pride. And I'd think, this isn't a burden, this is a gift. How many children get to grow up with magic? The government agents came back periodically. 1982, 1985, 1988, each time surveying coastline, asking questions, trying to access our property. Each time my father's lawyer would remind them about warrants, and they'd leave. But they never stopped watching. We'd see unmarked cars sometimes on the coastal road, occupants using binoculars to scan the cliffs. The pressure was constant, low level, but ever present. In 1989, Emma was 13 and Jacob was 9. Emma started asking questions I couldn't answer. Where did Marina come from? Were there others? What would happen when we were gone? I didn't have answers. I'd spent 15 years caring for Marina and knew almost nothing about her species, her biology, her lifespan. I knew she was intelligent, that she communicated, that she trusted us completely. But I didn't know if she was lonely, if she missed others of her kind, if the life we'd given her was better or worse than whatever she would have had in the wild. I went to the cove one evening, just me. Marina surfaced, and I talked to her, told her my doubts, my fears, my questions, asked her in our simple sign language if she was happy. She looked at me for a long moment. Then she touched my hand. One tap. Yes? But then she made a gesture I'd never seen. She pointed at herself, then at the open ocean beyond the cove entrance, then placed both hands over her heart. I think I understood. Yes, she was happy here. But part of her still belonged out there, in the depths we'd never see, with others we'd never meet. She was making the best of the life she had, but it wasn't the life she was meant for. And knowing that was the real weight of the secret we'd been keeping all along. In the spring of 1992, Marina started drawing in the sand at the shallow edge of the cove. Not random marks, but deliberate patterns. I was 42 by then, Emma 15, Jacob 11. We'd been caring for Marina for 18 years. The first map showed our coastline, rendered in remarkable detail, despite her never seeing it from above. She marked the cove with small stones. Then she drew lines extending into deeper water, marking points with different shells. Dark shells for deep places, light shells for shallow. "What are you showing me?" I asked. She pointed at the dark shells, then made our gesture for many. Multiple, many in the deep places. "You're showing me where your kind lives," I said. She tapped. Once, yes. Over weeks she drew more maps, coastlines I didn't recognize, underwater features no human had charted. The Monterey Canyon, the Mendocino Fracture Zone, then coastlines around the world, small marks in deep water off every continent. A scattered population hiding in unexplored depths. "Why don't you go to them?" I asked. Marina touched her tail, running hands over the thick scars. She made a swimming motion, then shook her head and pointed at the scars. She couldn't make the journey. The tail damage had healed, but not perfectly. The long-distance migration that would take her to others, the deep dives and sustained speed, were beyond her now. We'd saved her life, but also trapped her. In June 1993, something changed how I understood Marina's past. A small plane flew over, and Marina immediately dove, staying under for 20 minutes. When she surfaced, she was agitated, staying close to the rocks where overhang would hide her. She pulled herself onto the rocks and touched her shoulder, her side, her tail, in specific spots. 5 places. Then she made a gesture like something hitting, impacting. I looked closer and saw what I'd never noticed. Small scars, circular, about half an inch across. Entry wounds. "Someone shot you," I said. "Before we found you." She tapped once, 5 times. Marina had been hunted, deliberately. The net was an accident, but the bullets weren't. Over following months, she showed us more. Scars that looked like rope burns, a mark on her neck from a collar or restraint. She'd been caught before, held captive, then escaped or was released, only to be hunted again. I researched at the town library, found references to mysterious marine creatures in old newspapers dismissed as sea lions, found naval records mentioning classified research programs in the 1950s and 60s, documents with sections blacked out, budget items for Department of Defense with vague descriptions like marine mammal intelligence research and exotic species containment. Marina wasn't the first found by humans, probably not even the 100th, but she might have been one of the few who survived and escaped. In 1994, Marina drew one more map. She drew the coastline, the cove, our property, then human figures approaching from different directions, by land and sea. Then she drew herself swimming away through the channel into the ocean. She looked at me with a question. Should I go? Not yet, I said. You're safe here. We'll protect you. But I was thinking about the bullets, the hunting, the capture, the fact that government had never stopped looking. Maybe safety was an illusion we'd created to make ourselves feel better about keeping her in a place she couldn't leave on her own. March 1995, 21 years after we'd found Marina. Dr. Richard Castellano from UC Santa Cruz set up a research camp on the public beach 3/4 of a mile from our property, studying anomalous cetacean vocalizations, sounds that didn't match known species, occurring at night in our stretch of coastline. Marina had been singing, and someone had recorded it. Emma was 18, Jacob 14. They understood what this meant. I went to the beach and met Castellano, enthusiastic about his research. He showed me spectrograms, complex patterns suggesting intelligence. It's unlike anything in the literature, he said. I think we might be looking at an unknown cetacean. I've got funding for a month-long survey, setting up hydrophones along this coast. If the creature vocalizes again, I'll pinpoint its location. That night I explained to Marina, a man is listening. Equipment that can hear you underwater from far away. You can't make any sounds. No singing, clicking, nothing beyond the cove. She looked at me and I saw resignation. She tapped once. Yes. For 3 weeks, Marina stayed almost completely submerged. Quick breaths, then back down immediately. She wouldn't eat during daylight. I'd bring fish at night and she'd take them quickly, mechanically. By day, 18, she was losing weight, ribs showing, movement sluggish. She needs to hunt, Sarah said, to move normally, vocalize, exist. She's dying by inches. But Castellano remained, recording, searching. On day 21, he packed up and left. I ran to the cove. Marina was floating near bottom, barely moving. He's gone, I called. You can come up. She surfaced slowly, gaunt, exhausted, scales dull. She ate 6 fish without pausing. Then she made a soft, mournful sound. Loneliness or grief. I'd asked her to be silent, invisible, to deny her nature for 3 weeks. And she'd done it because she trusted me. The second close call came in August 2003. Emma was 26 by then, married to a man named Michael Reeves, living in Portland with their 2-year-old daughter Lily. Jacob was 23, working as a commercial fisherman on his own boat out of Crescent City. Sarah and I were still on the property, now in our early 50s, our lives entirely structured around Marina's care and concealment. A documentary crew arrived without warning, filming a piece about coastal wildlife for a nature program. They'd gotten permits to film on the public beaches and in the coastal waters. We first knew about them when we heard a helicopter, low and loud, flying up the coastline with a camera mounted on the side. I was at the cove when I heard it coming. Marina heard it too, her head snapping up at the sound. She dove immediately, but not before the helicopter passed directly overhead. I didn't know if they'd seen her, didn't know if the camera had been recording, didn't know if a split-second glimpse of something in the water would be enough to bring them back for a closer look. The helicopter made 3 more passes that day. Each time, Marina stayed deep, hiding in the darkest part of the cove where the water was murky and the overhang blocked the light. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about what footage they might have, what someone reviewing it might see. The next morning, the documentary crew set up on the beach with long-range cameras and started filming the water near our property line. They stayed for 6 days, filming dawn to dusk. I filed a harassment complaint with the county, claiming they were trespassing on private property, disturbing wildlife, creating noise pollution. The county didn't care. They had permits. On the 4th day, they launched a small drone with a camera, flying it along the coastline at low altitude. I watched it pass over the cove entrance, hovering, recording. I couldn't see Marina from where I stood on the cliff, but I knew she was down there, pressed against the rocks, barely breathing, praying in whatever way she could that they wouldn't find her. On the 7th day, they packed up and left. I found out later they'd gotten footage of something in the water, something that looked like a large marine mammal, but with unusual coloration and movement patterns. The footage was too unclear to identify definitively, so they'd decided it was probably a seal and not worth featuring in the documentary. We'd been saved by poor resolution and professional disinterest. When I told Marina they were gone, she surfaced for the first time in a week. She pulled herself onto the rocks, and I saw she was trembling, not from cold, from fear, from the exhaustion of staying hidden, staying silent, staying frozen in place while the world tried to find her. I sat down beside her, and she leaned against me, her head on my shoulder, her cold, wet skin soaking through my shirt. "I'm sorry," I said. "I'm so sorry you have to live like this." But I didn't know what else to say. I didn't know how to make it better. I just knew that every year the technology got more advanced, the surveillance more comprehensive, the hiding more difficult. And eventually, there would be a close call we couldn't survive. The first time I noticed Marina was aging was in the spring of 2015, 41 years after we'd pulled her from the nets. I was 65 years old, officially retired from fishing, but still doing maintenance work to keep busy. Sarah was 63, her hair completely gray, her hands showing the arthritis that would only get worse over the next few years. We'd been caring for Marina for most of our adult lives, and somewhere along the way, it had stopped being a burden and become simply what we did. Marina's scales had lost some of their iridescence. They were still beautiful, still caught the light when she moved, but the colors were more muted. The vibrant greens and blues and silvers had faded to softer shades. Her movements were slower too, more deliberate. She'd always been graceful in the water, but now there was a heaviness to her swimming, like each motion took more effort than it once had. I mentioned it to Sarah one evening. "Have you noticed Marina seems different? Tired, maybe?" "She's getting old," Sarah said simply. Like we are. I'd never really thought about Marina's lifespan, how long her kind lived, whether she was young or old when we found her. She'd seemed ageless for so long, unchanging except for the scars that marked her history. But Sarah was right. 41 years was a long time. If Marina had been young when we found her, in her 20s maybe, she'd be in her 60s now, the same age as us. Emma had 3 children by 2015. Lily was 14, her son Nathan was 11, and her youngest Claire was 8. Jacob had 2 kids, twins named Connor and Maya, who were 9. All 5 grandchildren knew about Marina. We'd taught them the same way we'd taught Emma and Jacob, starting young with simplified explanations and growing more complete as they got older. The grandchildren loved Marina. They'd come to the property for visits and spend hours at the cove, swimming with her, bringing her treasures they'd found, reading to her the way Emma used to. Marina seemed to enjoy the children, making that soft chirping sound when they arrived, surfacing, immediately to greet them. But I noticed she tired more easily now. After an hour of swimming with the kids, she'd need to rest. She'd float motionless in the deepest part of the cove, breathing slowly, recovering her strength. In November 2018, Sarah died. She'd been diagnosed with pancreatic cancer 6 months earlier, and by the time we found it, the disease was too advanced for treatment. She spent her last weeks at home, in our bed, with views of the ocean through the window. On the day she died, I went down to the cove to tell Marina. I don't know why. Maybe because Marina had been part of our lives for so long, as much family as anyone. Maybe because I needed to tell someone who would understand without words. "Sarah's gone," I said. I was standing at the water's edge, my voice rough from crying. "She died this morning, peacefully in her sleep. I thought you should know." Marina surfaced and looked at me. Then she made a sound I'd only heard a few times over the decades, a long, low vocalization that carried across the water, mournful and deep. She was singing Sarah's funeral song, though Sarah would never have a traditional funeral. Just a small memorial with family, a scattering of ashes over the ocean she'd loved. For 6 months after Sarah died, Marina didn't sing. Not the nighttime songs she'd make during full moons, not the clicks and whistles of communication. She was silent except for the necessary sounds of breathing and hunting. I understood. Grief took different forms, but the silence was universal. I was 70 by then, living alone in the house that felt too big without Sarah, still making the daily trips to the cove to feed Marina and check on her. Emma and Jacob offered to take over the care, to let me move closer to town, to somewhere easier, but I couldn't. Marina was my responsibility, had been since that day on the boat in 1974. I couldn't leave her now. The grandchildren helped more as they got older. Lily was 17, responsible enough to bring fish to the cove when I was busy or tired. Nathan and Claire would come on weekends, doing the heavy work of maintenance and cleaning. Connor and Maya, Jacob's twins, had inherited their father's love of the water and would spend whole afternoons swimming with Marina, keeping her company. In 2020, during the pandemic lockdowns, the property became a refuge. Emma's family stayed with me for 3 months, Jacob's for 2. The kids did school remotely while their parents worked from my living room. And through it all, Marina was there, in the cove, a constant in a world that had become uncertain and strange. The kids would go down to the water after their Zoom classes, and I'd watch them from the house, sitting with Marina on the rocks, talking to her about their fears and frustrations. She couldn't answer, couldn't offer advice, but she listened, and sometimes listening was enough. By 2022, Marina was moving even more slowly. She'd developed what looked like arthritis in her shoulders and tail, stiffness that made quick movements difficult. She couldn't hunt the fastest fish anymore, so I started bringing her pre-killed fish, already cleaned and prepared. She accepted them without complaint, but I could see in her eyes that she missed the hunt, missed the speed and freedom she'd once had. I was 72. Marina was probably in her 70s too, if my estimates were right. We were growing old together, two creatures who'd found each other by accident and been bound together by necessity and something that felt like family. I'd spent most of my life keeping her secret, keeping her safe. And as I felt my own energy fading, my own body slowing down, I wondered what would happen when I was gone. Who would care for her then? Who would protect her? October 17th, 2024. I was 74 years old, moving slower than I wanted to admit, when everything changed. Agent Caldwell had retired years ago. Agent Porter was probably dead. The government surveillance had decreased over the decades as technology advanced and priorities shifted. We'd started to believe maybe they'd forgotten. Maybe we were safe. We were wrong. The call came on a Thursday afternoon. A man identifying himself as Agent Marcus Wade from the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, though his credentials, when he showed them later, said Department of Defense. He wanted to schedule a meeting about the property, about unusual marine signatures detected by new satellite surveillance systems. "What kind of signatures?" I asked, my hand gripping the phone. "Thermal imaging data," Wade said. His voice was professional, emotionless. New satellite technology designed to track marine mammal populations has detected an anomalous heat signature in the cove on your property. The signature registers as mammalian, but with unusual patterns. We need to investigate. "The property is private," I said. "You need a warrant." "We have one," Wade replied. "I can be there in 3 hours with a team. You can cooperate voluntarily, or we can execute the warrant with law enforcement support. Your choice, Mr. Chen. I called Emma and Jacob immediately. They're coming, I said. They found her with satellites. They have a warrant. We're out of time. Emma arrived within 2 hours, Jacob 30 minutes after her. We sat at the kitchen table, the same table where Sarah and I had made so many decisions about Marina over the years, and tried to figure out what to do. We can hide her, Jacob said. Take her out through the channel at night, let her swim along the coast to somewhere else. She can't make that swim, Emma said quietly. She's too old, too stiff. She'd never survive in the open ocean now. She might not survive another week in the cove once they start their investigation. What if we refuse to let them on the property, I asked. Fight it in court? Dad, Jacob said, they have satellite images. They have evidence. A judge is going to side with the government, especially if they claim it's a matter of national security or scientific importance. We can't win this legally. Then what do we do? I asked. Emma looked at me, and I saw tears in her eyes. We let her go, Emma said. We open the channel as wide as we can, and we give her the choice. Maybe she can make it. Maybe she'll find others. Maybe she'll die free instead of dying in captivity. It's the only option we have left. Agent Wade arrived at 5 p.m. with a team of 8 people, marine biologists, Navy personnel, someone from Fish and Wildlife. They had equipment, cameras, sensors. Wade showed me the warrant, which was thorough and specific. They had authorization to access the cove, to document and capture any marine life found there, to conduct comprehensive analysis. The warrant gave them 7 days of access. We need to see the cove, Wade said, now. I looked at him, this man who'd spent years searching for what we'd been hiding. I could refuse, I said. Make you get a court order to force compliance. That would buy us time. We have 24-hour surveillance on the property now, Wade said. If you attempt to move or release anything from that cove, we'll know. Satellites are watching. We have personnel on the coastal roads. You can delay us, Mr. Chen, but you can't hide what's there anymore. I took them to the cove, all of them, with their cameras and their equipment and their clinical interest in something they couldn't possibly understand. Marina was at the surface when we arrived. She took one look at the group of people, at the equipment, at Wade's face, and she dove. They saw her. Of course they saw her. The afternoon sun was perfect, the water clear, and for just a moment before she disappeared, they saw what I'd been protecting for 50 years. Wade turned to me. His face was calm, but his eyes were sharp. Mr. Chen, you've been concealing an unknown species of marine life on your property for an undisclosed period of time. That's a federal offense. The penalties are significant. But if you cooperate fully, we can discuss reduced charges. When did you discover it? 50 years ago, I said. August 1974, Hurricane Delilah. We found her dying in our nets and brought her here to heal. She never left. Wade nodded slowly, like he'd expected that answer. We're going to need to capture and study the specimen, he said. We'll be as humane as possible, but removal is necessary. This could be one of the most significant biological discoveries of the century. We need to understand what it is, where it came from, if there are others. She's not an it, I said. Her name is Marina. She's intelligent. She communicates. She's been part of this family for 50 years. You can't just take her. Mr. Chen, Wade said, we have a warrant. We will be taking custody of the specimen within the next 72 hours. You can make this difficult, or you can help us do this humanely. What's it going to be? I looked down at the water where Marina was hiding in the darkness, and I felt something break inside me. I'd always known this day might come. I'd always feared it, but knowing and experiencing were different things. We'll cooperate, I said quietly, on one condition. You give me 3 days with her first, 3 days to say goodbye. Wade considered this, then he nodded. 72 hours, he said. We'll be back Monday morning at 8 a.m. Be ready. They left 2 people behind to watch the property. Men in dark SUVs parked on the coastal road with clear sight lines to the cove entrance, making sure we didn't try to run, making sure Marina stayed where she was until they came back to take her. That night, after the last of Wade's team had driven away, Emma and Jacob and I went down to the cove. Marina surfaced immediately, and I could see the fear in her eyes. She'd understood what was happening, understood the equipment and the cameras and the clinical interest. She'd seen it before, I realized, before we found her, before the bullets and the nets and whatever captivity she'd escaped from. We have 3 days, I told her. Then they come back with equipment to capture you. They'll take you to a facility somewhere, study you, keep you in a tank. You'll never see the ocean again, never have freedom. I stopped, my throat tight. I'm sorry, Marina. I'm so sorry we couldn't protect you. Emma knelt at the water's edge. We want to give you a choice, she said. We can open the channel wider, remove the barrier we built to keep the water clean and controlled. You could swim out into the open ocean. Try to find others of your kind. It's dangerous, and we don't know if you can make it. But it's a choice. Marina looked at the three of us. Then she looked toward the channel, toward the narrow passage that connected her protected cove to the open sea. She'd been in this cove for 50 years, half a century in the same 40 feet of water, the same rocks, the same routine. She was old now, stiff, not the powerful swimmer she'd been when we found her. The open ocean was vast and cold and full of dangers she might not survive. But the alternative was captivity, was dying in a tank somewhere while scientists studied her, while her existence became a classified government secret, while everything she was got reduced to data and tissue samples. She made a gesture, hands together, then spreading apart. Many. She was asking if others were out there, if we knew where her kind could be found. I don't know, I said honestly. You showed us maps, places where you thought they might be. But I don't know if they're still there. I don't know if you can find them. It might be thousands of miles. It might be impossible. She was quiet for a long time. Then she tapped once. Yes, she wanted to try. We spent the next 2 days preparing. I brought extra fish, more than she could eat, trying to build up her strength. Jacob reinforced the channel opening, removing the small barrier we'd installed years ago to control water flow and debris. Emma came with her family, and the kids spent hours in the water with Marina, swimming with her, touching her, saying goodbye without words, because words weren't enough. On Sunday night, the night before Agent Wade would return, we gathered at the cove. All of us, me, Emma, and her husband, and their 3 children, Jacob and his wife and their twins. 3 generations of family who'd kept this secret, protected this creature, built our lives around something impossible. Marina was at the surface, watching us with those dark eyes that had seen so much. I waded into the water, not caring that I was getting soaked, and I put my hand on her shoulder. "Thank you," I said, "for trusting us, for letting us be part of your life. I hope you find what you're looking for out there. I hope you find others. I hope you find home." Marina reached up and touched my face with one cold, rough hand. Then she made that soft, chirping sound, the one she'd made when she first met Emma, when the grandchildren were born, when something made her happy. She clicked once, twice, 3 times. Then she turned toward the channel. The moon was dark that night. No light to betray her to the satellites, to the watchers on the road. The tide was high, the channel wide, and deep enough for her to pass through. We watched her swim toward the opening, her movement slow but purposeful. She reached the narrow passage and paused, looking back at us one final time. Emma was crying. The grandchildren were holding hands, silent. Jacob had his arm around his wife. And I stood there in the water, my legs numb from the cold, watching Marina make the choice we'd given her. She made one more sound, that long, low vocalization she'd made when Sarah died. A goodbye song. Then she slipped through the channel and into the open ocean beyond. We stayed there for an hour, watching the dark water, hoping to see her surface one more time. She didn't. She'd gone deep, the way her kind did, swimming away from the lights and the land and the humans who'd tried to protect her but ultimately couldn't. When we finally climbed back up to the house, none of us spoke. There was nothing to say. Agent Wade arrived Monday morning at exactly 8 a.m. with his team and their equipment. I met them at the gate. "She's gone," I said. "Went through the channel last night at high tide." Wade's face hardened. "You were ordered not to release the specimen. That's obstruction of justice, Mr. Chen." "I didn't release anything," I said. "I opened a natural channel that was always part of the cove. What happened after that was her choice." Wade and his team spent 6 hours at the cove. They took samples, measurements, photographs of everything. They found Marina's shed scales in the rocks, her markings on the sandy bottom, evidence that something had lived there for decades. But they didn't find Marina. She was gone. Wade threatened me with charges: obstruction, concealment, violation of federal wildlife laws. But in the end, no charges came, maybe because they had no proof of what Marina was without capturing her. Maybe because a 74-year-old man who'd spent 50 years protecting something impossible wasn't worth the publicity of a trial. Maybe because somewhere in the bureaucracy, someone decided letting her go was the right thing to do. The government seized my documentation, the journal I'd kept, the photographs I'd taken over the years, the measurements and observations. They classified everything, threatened prosecution if I spoke about what they called the alleged specimen. But I'm an old man now, and the worst they can do to me is take away the years I have left. Marina deserves to be remembered, not as a specimen, but as a person, as family. Sometimes, on quiet nights, I think I hear her song carried on the wind from somewhere out past the breakers. Maybe it's wishful thinking. Maybe it's just the ocean making the sounds it always makes. But I choose to believe she made it, that she found others, that she's free in the depths. We'll never explore, living the life she was always meant to have. The cove is empty now. The water still fills with the tide, still drains twice daily. But there's no one there to greet me when I climb down the rocks. No soft clicks, no curious eyes watching from the surface. Just water and stone and memory. I'm 74 years old and I've kept a secret for 50 years. But secrets are meant to be shared eventually. Marina existed. She was real. And she mattered.